Hey guys, Inky Tiger here with the very first voiceover of a digital slash traditional drawing I did. So recently, I was asked by a friend of mine who's actually an art teacher, and he wanted some advice for his kids about art tips in general, especially for people who are interested in art as a career, whether it's in animation or comic books, illustration, that sort of thing. Here's just a few tips I have. This stuff that I've either learned over the years personally, stuff I wish I would have learned sooner, stuff that I hope will be useful. The video you're watching right now is me doing a digital version of a colored pencil drawing I did a few months ago. It's been a while. I've been really busy. Yeah, but the digital version is very recent. But anyways, without further ado, here is my advice to young slash burgeoning artists. Things I wish I knew sooner. Okay, to start off with something that I think is really important, something that every artist should keep in mind no matter what your skill level. I've heard it said before, and I'm not exactly sure where, but I thought it was a very, very good simile, especially with beginning artists. But I feel like some veteran artists could really keep this advice in mind every once in a while too, because believe it or not, if you're just starting out, every veteran out there struggles with imposter syndrome every once in a while. So, first thing you should always keep in mind with your art, whether drawing or painting, digital, whatever. Art is a lot like dessert in that everyone is always going to have different tastes. So, what does that mean? Basically, if you think of it like this, your art is like a cherry cheesecake. Some people really don't like cherries, some people don't like cheesecake, some people are super lactose intolerant. But there are people out there that absolutely adore cherry cheesecake. But there's this other artist whose work is a lot more like a vegan chocolate cake. And some people are just obsessed with this vegan chocolate cake, but you can't really stand it because you think it tastes fake and you need those eggs and milk ingredients. I don't know, whatever. This is quickly falling apart. So basically, you might draw comic art and another person, they draw works that basically make Da Vinci look like a fool. You both are still artists. Some people are going to want those really fine works of art that would be relegated to the Renaissance portion of museum, and some people want stuff that you would find in a comic book store. So the main thing is that you're going to have a different audience. Not everybody's going to like your work, but there always will be someone that does. And you should always keep that in mind. You should be creating for yourself, but if you're not just creating for yourself, it's good to remember that there will be people out there that like your work. Whether or not you found them yet is a different story, but there will be people out there that like it. So you should keep creating. Next tip kind of lumps in with the first one. You cannot compare your art to other artists. Comparing your art to other artists is like trying to compare that cheesecake with that vegan chocolate cake. It's just you can't compare the two. They're two different things. So, instead of comparing your art to other artists' work, try comparing your art to your past self's work. So, your cherry cheesecake used to be kind of decent, and it wasn't bad, but you wouldn't reach for it first if you had other dessert around. So say you've been practicing and perfecting the recipe and now your recipe's gotten pretty good compared to what it used to be a year ago. That's exactly what you should be doing with your art is you should compare your work now to your past self's work. Tip number the third. I might get a little bit of backlash from this, but I am a firm believer in that it's not the medium that you use, but how you use the medium. What do I mean by that? I'm not saying like archival quality colored pencils are the same as Crayola pencils from Walgreens. No, that's not saying that at all. But what I am saying is when you're working on a piece, whether it be for practice or you're working through when you're working on a piece, it's how you handle the medium. Um, so you can be working with a Curl Quill pen and some nice India ink, or you could be working with like a rollerball pen, like from the drugstore. Again, it's how you use it. So Whether your line work is really good or really bad, the tool you're using is not going to change that. So practice with what you can afford. If you can't afford the fancy stuff, it's fine. If you're selling your work, that's another story. You want to make sure that that's high quality and actually lasts the person a while. And if it's not, then you need to charge them accordingly. But if you're just working on um, practice pieces, especially, or you're working on a piece that you need to scan into a computer and you don't need to worry about it fading, that sort of thing, um, I can't stress it enough. It's not the medium, it's how you use it. A pack of Crayolas can make an exquisite landscape in the right hands. Next big tip I have is use references, especially from real life. Does that include pictures off the internet? No, absolutely not. You need to go out into the real world. I know, introverts, I'm so sorry. And you need to look at people, be around spaces, draw the things out in the real world. You can try drawing stuff from your computer or books, but it's not the same as being out in the 3D space and understanding how the light and the form work in reality. There's just no comparison. You need to go out and study things from life. And when you're working on poses or hairstyles, expressions, um, it's it's fine to use references from the internet, um, just for poses and that sort of thing once you have a grasp on anatomy and structure. But you absolutely should use references. I hear people saying, "Oh, well, this would be a lot better if I hadn't used a reference for it." That's baloney. Even the most professional artists use references. It's foolish not to use references. The best way to use them is to study multiple versions of the thing that you're trying to create. So you look at the versions like of the pictures that you found online. You draw them a few times, understand how they work, they function, and they're put together. And then once you have a solid understanding of that, you'll know how to draw it, and that's your reference. And now that you've referenced it properly and well, you shouldn't need to learn how to draw it again. You already know how to draw it, and you shouldn't have to look for it in real life. That's the ideal way to look for references. I feel like that's not always explained on the internet very well, but you definitely need multiple sources for a good reference. Next tip is, and this is something I didn't learn until fairly recently, but I think it's very important, is you should always know the difference between your practice pieces and your finished works. What that means is you have an idea for this really incredible digital painting, but you don't know how to draw a specific tree or a specific bike or how the spokes are supposed to look on the wheel or how you want the composition to look. So, your practice drawings, you want to have thumbnails of that picture where you draw multiple ideas of how the composition could look, where things are going to be placed, the sizes of things, and colors you might want to try. And those are all practice pieces. So they can be a little bit messier, they can be a little bit smaller, definitely not as polished. But there's going to be multiple versions of them, and they're not going to be perfect, and that's fine. But then you're going to want a finished work, which is not all of your practice drawings of trees or practice drawings of bikes. It's the one piece that you're going to spend hours on, not just hours. You could possibly be spending days on a finished work, whereas practice pieces you can spend a few hours on even, and it's still considered a practice piece. So make sure you know the difference with the time and effort that you're putting into a work. If you think it's done, but it only took you a few minutes, maybe you need to take a look at it again. Go over the composition, see if there's anything you could improve, any of the color theory you could work on, lights, shadows, etc. Next tip, draw as much as you can, even when you don't want to. If you want to be a professional in the art fields, there is no such thing as a block. You can try and tell yourself that, but you cannot walk into your job and say, "I'm just not feeling it today," you know? And your boss would be like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. Why don't you just sit here, play this Nintendo Wii for a bit, and just hang out? I'm gonna go over here, get you some coffee, and you just chill, and we'll work through this block, okay?" No, that does not happen in real life. So sometimes you're going to have to draw, and you're not gonna like it, and it's gonna suck, and that's just part of the job. Most jobs are like that, and honestly, if you really, really love art, the good is gonna outweigh the bad every time. It's yeah, I would say the best thing to keep in mind in that situation is remember how hard it would be to not create and how lucky you are and how hard you worked to get into a position where you can create. You might be feeling creatively stifled. You might be feeling a block, but you just have to draw through it, even if you don't feel inspired. It'll go away eventually. Just keep drawing through it. Make yourself draw for 5 minutes and then stop and then see if you want to keep drawing after that because now you're started. Now it's a little bit easier when you don't have a blank page staring up at you. Things that I've found help cure creative blocks are walks, especially walks in nature. If you have access to that, I would recommend walking through parks, walking around your neighborhood if it's safe. Music is also a huge help. Other advice I have for getting through art blocks or creative blocks is if you're going on one of those walks, take a headset or headphones with you and just sort of talk and like come up with creative ideas. Say like, "Oh, look at this person over here. What if they were secretly a superhero with a magic dog that spoke Russian?" So now you've got a bizarre story idea that you kind of want to illustrate. It's that easy. Kind of it's kind of a stream of consciousness creativity, I suppose, but it's insanely helpful for getting through a creative block. My next tip is to keep some of your old work to see how far you've come over the days or months or years even. The reason I say this is because I know a lot of artists that will look at their old work and kind of cringe and get frustrated and then throw it away or burn it or, leave it out in the rain or whatever. They just find it horrifying. They want to get rid of it. But one of the best reasons to actually hang on to this stuff is to keep track of your progress. And it kind of comes back to that point I made earlier about how important it is to compare your current art to your past art. You need to hang on to some of your old art so you can do that. And there is going to be some good stuff about it too. Like, you don't always need to just bash your old stuff because it's old. I mean, there was something about it at the time that made it good or made you proud of it, and you should hang on to that. And another reason you should hang on to your old work is, believe it or not, if you pull it out while you're struggling for creative ideas, you might find yourself looking at something with a new perspective, and you have the skills or abilities now to make it even better. So I can't stress how important it is to just hang on to some of your old stuff. You might find that you actually want to retell the story or redraw the character, and who knows, you might have like a whole series on your hands all because you hung on to this one thing. Next tip is, and this one is especially for younger artists or artists that are just starting out, stop being embarrassed about your work. Don't explain things away or say, "I can do so much better now." Just don't. Stop yourself. If you're at a portfolio review day or if you're going over your work with a teacher or showing a friend, don't tell them how bad it is or how much better you could draw it today than you did yesterday. Just don't do that. Don't speak. Let them see your work. Let them make their judgments. Let them enjoy it, hate it, whatever. Let them own their own emotions. You're not responsible for them. And then let them talk. And if they ask you questions, say like, how hard was it to draw this? Did this take you this amount of time? Then you can answer. Let them make their own judgments. You don't need to put your work down so that you can let yourself down a little bit easier. You really don't need to do that and you shouldn't do that. This tip is for artists who are actually already working in the professional field. So, say you have full time freelance work, you work in a studio or you work in a company, you have your own business, whatever. You are doing art for other people full time. That's awesome. Congratulations, you actually made it. I think the rest of the art world is jealous. You're doing this art full time and you just have enough time to do the art, do your laundry, cook for yourself every once in a while, but that's it. And then you're constantly doing the rest of your studio work and freelance in your free time. You need to make sure that you have time to work on your IPs too. And what are IPs? IPs are intellectual property, and I cannot stress enough how important they are, especially if you're in the animation business or any part of pop culture these days, to be honest. Um, your intellectual properties are so important. Anybody can have an idea for a story. Ideas are a dime a dozen. The ones that are finished are the ones that stand out. And an artist who can copy other artists and copy styles is good. They're not a bad artist, but it's more valuable if they also have their own stories and their own characters and their own ideas to contribute. So it's really important to work on your own projects as well as other people's. This tip is kind of for any perfectionists out there, and that is it is better to have a finished work that is not perfect as opposed to an unfinished perfect work. Now, what do I mean by that? Um, you're working on a project and you decide that you can't make it perfect, but you want it finished. No, let me backtrack. Okay, so you're working on a project and you're getting all the details just so. You're using a ruler to make all the lines just perfect. Um, you're going very slowly, taking your time, making sure that every detail is just so that you have the perfectly correct vision and you have all the details drawn out to the best of your abilities. Every little detail is perfect, except for the fact that you put so much time and so much effort into trying to create this perfect thing that you abandon the project and you never finish it. That's going to look way less impressive than an imperfect finished project. The reason I say that is because one, to show a finished product, to show a finished project to an employer is a really impressive feat. For another thing, the thing that you worked on making so perfect and it was so time consuming and so intensive that you just gave up on it halfway through, you're going to look at it in a year, realize how much you've improved, and say, wow, not only is this not done, I can draw a lot better now. So it ends up doubly frustrating and probably just as time consuming. So honestly, if the thing you're working on isn't perfect, that's fine. Just make sure you finish it. And this is my last tip, and I would say it applies more in terms of whether you're doing like visual development work, concept art, storyboarding, comic books, that sort of thing. But I think it could also apply to fine arts as well. But this tip is really important to me, and it is asking yourself the question, what story does this art tell? Um, really good pictures, really good paintings, really good drawings tell a story. Um, what does that mean exactly? So, the way the picture is composed or colored, whether it's in a space or outside, whether it's nighttime, daytime, are there characters or figures in the piece? Um, those are all telling something. Um, A visually engaging piece, something that's interesting to look at and something that'll make you ask questions, is a picture that tells a story. So, say you have a picture of um, a little boy and he's in a meadow. There's cloudy skies and he's watching a balloon fly up into the sky and it's a red balloon. Why is the boy out when it looks like it's about to rain? Why is he out in a field? What is the balloon doing there? Why is it red? Those are all questions the viewer is going to have. Now you have a story. It's visually engaging and the audience wants to know why. The most successful pieces you have are going to pose a question to the viewer, and I think you'll find that those are going to be your most successful pieces. Those will be the pieces that will have your audience invested in the work. Now they want to know what's going on in that picture, so they'll ask, why is this like this? Oh, maybe it's because the boy is running away from something and he accidentally let go of his balloon, and that's a metaphor for something. Well, now they have a story, and they just created that whole story because you posed the question, what is this storytelling? Um, I feel like that makes for a lot more successful work than just, I thought I would draw a kid because I need to practice that, and I don't do naturescapes very much. Well, this helps you practice and it poses an interesting visual question. So, wow, that was a really long video. I kind of talked a lot. I hope at least some of it made sense. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, share with your friends. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.